Pregnant wife discovers husband's love affair, leaves letter and disappears forever. He regrets it. The morning light filtered through the curtains of their Boston apartment, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Diane Hale stood by the kitchen window, her 7-month pregnant belly brushing against the counter as she prepared Richard's coffee. Her light brown waves were twisted into her signature messy bun, and her delicate fingers traced the spine of the old notebook where she'd been writing her thoughts lately. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that had become their unwanted companion over the past months. Richard's side of the bed had been cold when she woke up. Again, another early meeting, another late night at the office, another excuse that she pretended to believe. Diane picked up her ceramic mug, the one with tiny purple flowers that reminded her of her grandmother's garden. She'd been teaching literature at Brighton High School until 3 months ago, when Richard insisted she should rest during the pregnancy. "We can manage with my income," he'd said, his dark eyes fixed on his laptop screen rather than her face. She'd agreed, not because she wanted to stop teaching, but because fighting felt pointless these days. The tablet on the kitchen counter lit up with a notification. Diane normally wouldn't look, she respected his privacy, always had, but something about the preview caught her eye. A message from Lindsay Wheeler. "Last night was exactly what I needed." Her hands trembled as she unlocked the screen. The message thread unfolded like a horror story she couldn't stop reading. Pictures, date stamps, hotel receipts, everything meticulously documented in his work tablet that he'd forgotten to take this morning. The truth hit her with the force of a silent earthquake. No screaming, no breaking dishes, just the sound of her world crumbling quietly around her, like snow falling on a winter night. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling their baby kick. "We'll be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the child within, moving with the calculated precision of someone who had already made an irreversible decision. She walked to their home office. The leather chair creaked as she sat at the desk. Her fingers found an old piece of stationery, cream-colored paper they'd bought for their wedding thank you notes 3 years ago. How fitting to use it now, she thought, for their goodbye. "Richard, I always believed that love was about the small things. The coffee you never learned to make properly. The way you used to touch my hair when you thought I was sleeping. The silent agreements we made with our eyes across crowded rooms. But love is also about the big things. Trust, respect, presence. I've been holding us together for so long that I forgot what it feels like to be whole on my own. You stopped seeing me months ago, maybe even before that. The funny thing is, in trying so hard not to become your father, you became something else entirely. A stranger wearing my husband's face. I won't scream. I won't demand explanations. The tablet you left behind this morning told me everything I needed to know, and somehow it only confirmed what my heart already knew. You lost me before you even realized there was something to lose. Don't try to find me. By the time you read this, I'll be somewhere else, building a life where I don't have to pretend that silence is the same as peace. Diane." She folded the letter carefully, placing it on the kitchen counter where he always dropped his keys. Then, with movements that felt surreal in their calmness, she packed a single suitcase, clothes, documents, the notebook filled with her scattered thoughts, the small box of savings she'd kept from her teaching days, the one he never knew about because he never asked about her finances. Before leaving, Diane stood in the doorway of their apartment. No, his apartment now, and looked back one last time. The morning light had shifted, creating new shadows on the walls. She placed her hand on her belly again, feeling the gentle movement within. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered. And sometimes, and that's more than enough. The door closed behind her with a soft click, the sound of an ending that felt strangely like a beginning. The interstate stretched endlessly before Diane as she drove north, her pregnant belly almost touching the steering wheel. The morning had melted into afternoon, and Boston's skyline had long disappeared from her rearview mirror. She'd been driving for hours, stopping only when necessary, letting muscle memory guide her while her mind wandered through the wreckage of her marriage. Her phone buzzed again, the 15th time in the past 2 hours. Richard's name flashed on the screen, along with a string of missed calls and unread messages. She could almost hear his controlled voice, the way he'd try to rationalize everything, to explain it all away with that same careful tone he used with difficult clients. At a rest stop in New Hampshire, Diane pulled over. Her back ached, and the baby was particularly active, as if sensing her turmoil. She reached into her purse and pulled out her old notebook, its pages dog-eared and filled with her neat handwriting. Opening to a fresh page, she wrote, "Hour 6 of freedom. Is it freedom when your heart feels like a locked room? When every mile marker reminds you of another morning you chose to ignore the signs?" The late October wind whipped around her car, carrying golden leaves that danced across her windshield. She hadn't planned on Vermont, but something about the state line sign had called to her. Maybe it was the promise of mountains and forests, of places where she could disappear into the landscape like morning mist. A young couple walked past her car, the woman heavily pregnant like herself. They were laughing, sharing a bag of chips, their happiness so casual it made Diane's chest ache. She watched them through her side mirror until they disappeared into the rest stop building. Her hand found her belly again, a gesture that had become both comfort and anchor. "We need a plan," she murmured to her unborn child. "A real one, not just running." The baby kicked in response, right under her palm, as if agreeing. Opening her laptop, she accessed her banking app. The savings from her teaching days weren't much, just over $8,000, but it was something Richard had never known about. A secret fund she'd maintained even after he insisted she quit her job, as if some part of her had always known she might need an escape route. She Googled small towns in Vermont, scrolling through images of church steeples and main streets lined with maple trees. Her finger paused over a picture of Millbrook, population 3,421. Something about its modest storefronts and surrounding hills spoke to her. It was far enough from major cities to feel safe, small enough to disappear into. Another call from Richard. This time, a voicemail followed. "Diane, please, I know you saw the messages. I can explain everything. Lindsay means nothing. It was a mistake. Think about our baby. We can fix this. Just come home. We'll talk about it. I'll do whatever you want. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't do this to us." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, Diane felt her resolve waver. It would be so easy to turn around, to pretend she could unknow what she knew, unsee what she'd seen, to fall back into the comfortable pattern of being the understanding wife, the one who carried the emotional weight of their relationship while he built walls around his grief over his father's death. But then she remembered the hotel receipts, the casual intimacy of the messages, the months of lonely dinners and cold bed sheets, the way he'd gradually stopped looking at her, really looking at her, sometime after she'd announced her pregnancy. With steady hands, she deleted the voicemail. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she removed the SIM card from her phone and dropped it into a nearby trash can. The action felt final, like cutting an umbilical cord. Back in the car, she pulled up directions to Millbrook, 4 more hours north. She could make it before sunset if she didn't stop again. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon light as she gripped the steering wheel. Without looking, she slipped it off and placed it in the glove compartment. "Next stop, Millbrook," she said to her belly, trying to inject cheerfulness into her voice. "Just you and me, little one. Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves." As she merged back onto the interstate, the autumn sun painted the mountains ahead in shades of gold and crimson. Diane felt something shift inside her, not the baby this time, but something deeper, a quiet certainty that while she didn't know exactly where she was going, she knew with absolute clarity what she was leaving behind. The road ahead curved through the mountains like a question mark. For the first time since reading those messages on the tablet, Diane felt ready to find the answer. Millbrook's welcome sign appeared through the early morning fog, its faded paint suggesting a town that wore its age with quiet dignity. Diane had spent the night in her car at a highway rest stop, unable to afford a motel after realizing how quickly her savings would need to stretch. Her back protested as she drove down Main Street, past storefronts that were just beginning to show signs of life. Miller's Market stood at the corner of Maple and Pine, its red brick facade warm against the cool October morning. The Help Wanted sign in the window felt like an answer to an unspoken prayer. Diane parked her car, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her light brown hair had lost its usual soft waves to the humidity. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. Behind the counter, a woman with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat braid looked up from her morning paperwork. "We're not quite open yet, honey," the woman said, then paused, taking in Diane's pregnant belly and travel-worn appearance. Something shifted in her expression. Not pity, but recognition. Though I suppose you're not here for groceries, are you? The sign in the window. Diane gestured awkwardly. I was hoping. I'm Inez Marlowe. Been running this place for longer than I care to admit. She came around the counter, her movements efficient but unhurried. You look like you could use some breakfast first. Come on back. Before Diane could protest, Inez led her through a door marked Employees Only to a small break room. The space was modest but clean, with a coffee maker that had probably seen the birth of several generations and a small round table that had weathered countless lunch breaks. Sit, Inez commanded, pulling out a chair. That baby needs more than whatever gas station coffee you've been surviving on. Diane sank into the chair, sudden tears pricking at her eyes. It was the first genuine kindness she'd encountered since leaving Boston, and it threatened to unravel her carefully maintained composure. I don't mean to be a burden, she managed. Honey, burdens are what we call the things we're too proud to let help us grow. Inez placed a mug of herbal tea and a fresh muffin in front of her. Now, you want to tell me what brings a woman in your condition to Millbrook at 7 in the morning? The words tumbled out before Diane could stop them. Not everything. She kept Richard's name and the details of his betrayal to herself, but enough. The marriage, the loneliness, the discovery, the need to start over. Inez listened without interrupting, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. When Diane finished, she nodded once, decisively. The room above my garage has been empty since my daughter moved to college. It's small, but it's clean. $500 a month, utilities included. You can start work here today if you want it. Register first, then we'll train you on other things. Pays not much, but it's steady. Diane stared at her, wondering if exhaustion was making her hallucinate. You don't even know me. I know enough, Inez replied, refilling Diane's tea. I know what it looks like when someone's running from something versus running toward something. You've got the look of both, which means you're thinking clearly despite being scared. That's good enough for me. I could be anyone, Diane protested weakly. You could be, Inez agreed, but you're not. You're someone who needs a chance, and I'm someone who remembers what that feels like. She pulled out a ring of keys, separating one from the others. The room's yours if you want it. Job too. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't know why yet. Diane wrapped her fingers around the warm mug, feeling something loosen in her chest. Through the break room's small window, she could see the mountains rising behind the town, solid and unchanging. A chickadee landed on the windowsill, tilting its head as if considering her. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Thank me by proving me right about you, Inez said simply. Now finish that tea.
Store opens in 20 minutes, and I've got a lot to teach you about running a register. As Inez walked out to prepare for opening, Diane pulled out her notebook, adding a new entry. Sometimes sanctuary comes in unexpected forms. A stranger's kindness. A small room above a garage. A chance to be someone new in a town where no one knows your story but your own. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, and for the first time in days, Diane allowed herself to smile.
It wasn't much, this tiny foothold in a strange town, but it was a beginning, and sometimes, beginnings were all you needed to build a whole new world. 2 weeks had passed since Diane's arrival in Millbrook. The small room above Inez's garage had slowly transformed from a stranger's space into something resembling home. A second-hand rocking chair now sat by the window, and her collection of notebooks lined the weathered bookshelf that Inez had helped her rescue from the thrift store. The morning shift at Miller's Market had just begun, and Diane's fingers moved methodically over the register keys. She'd learned the rhythm of small-town shopping, the early rush of contractors grabbing coffee, the mid-morning parade of elderly customers who came as much for conversation as groceries, the lunch crowd from the nearby offices. You're getting faster, Inez commented, appearing beside her with a fresh price gun. Though you might want to take a break. You've been standing for 3 hours straight. Before Diane could protest, Mrs. Henderson, a regular customer in her 80s, chimed in from the other side of the counter. Listen to Inez, dear. That baby needs rest as much as you do. My Harold Jr. was born 2 weeks early because I was too stubborn to slow down. Diane smiled, touching her now 8-month belly. Just let me finish this line of customers. Then I'll take that break. Meanwhile, in Boston, Richard Pierce sat in his corner office, staring at the untouched stack of financial reports on his desk. His usually immaculate appearance had begun to slip, his tie slightly askew, dark circles under his eyes, his normally clean-shaven face showing 3 days of stubble. The private investigator's latest report lay open on his laptop. No credit card activity. No cell phone usage. Cash withdrawal from an ATM in New Hampshire 2 weeks ago. Trail goes cold after that. He minimized the report as Lindsay Wheeler appeared in his doorway. "The Morrison account meeting starts in 5 minutes, she said, her voice professional, distant. The affair had ended the day Diane left, though in truth, it had been over long before that. Just another symptom of his inability to face his own grief. "Cancel it," he said, standing abruptly. "Cancel everything today." Back in Millbrook, Diane sat in the break room, sipping chamomile tea and writing in her newest notebook. Some days, the absence feels like a physical thing, a shadow that follows me, reminding me of everything I left behind. Other days, it feels like taking off a heavy coat I didn't realize I was wearing. The simplicity of this life, the honest work, the way Inez looks out for me without demanding my story. It's teaching me something about strength I never knew in my old life. The door creaked open and Inez entered with a paper bag. "Brought you some lunch. That deli down the street makes a sandwich that'll make your baby dance." "You don't have to keep taking care of me," Diane protested softly. "Nobody has to do anything," Inez replied, setting the bag down. "That's what makes kindness worth something." She paused, studying Diane's face. "You had that dream again last night, didn't you? Heard you pacing?" Diane nodded. The dream was always the same. Walking into their Boston apartment, finding it exactly as she'd left it, as if time had stopped. Richard standing by the window. But when he turned, he wore his father's face. Empty, distant, already gone. "My daughter's father was like that," Inez said, settling into the chair across from her. "A man who lived so deep inside his own pain that he couldn't see anyone else's. Took me years to learn that loving someone doesn't mean drowning with them." In his Boston office, Richard opened his father's old pocket watch, the one he'd started carrying after the funeral. Inside was a faded photo, him as a child, sitting on his father's shoulders, both of them laughing. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that. His therapist's words from yesterday's session echoed in his mind. "You're not just grieving your wife's departure. You're grieving your father, your marriage, the person you thought you were. The question is, what are you going to do with that grief?" The late afternoon sun filtered through Millbrook's changing leaves as Diane finished her shift. Her feet ached, but it was an honest tiredness, different from the emotional exhaustion she'd known in Boston. "Movie night," Inez announced as they closed up. "I've got popcorn and that weird herbal hot chocolate you like. No arguments, you need the company, and I need someone to explain these new superhero movies to me." Diane felt the baby kick, as if agreeing with Inez. "Okay," she said, surprising herself with a small laugh, "but only if you let me help with dinner first." "Deal," Inez smiled, flipping the store sign to "closed." "And maybe tonight you'll finally tell me what you're always writing in those notebooks of yours." As they walked home in the gathering dusk, Diane realized something. For the first time since leaving Boston, the weight in her chest felt lighter. Not gone, she wasn't sure it would ever be completely gone, but different, like a wound that was finally being allowed to heal. The November wind rattled the windows of Diane's small room as she jolted awake, her hand instinctively reaching for her belly. The baby was especially active tonight, perhaps sensing her unease. She'd been dreaming of Richard again, but this time it was different. He was standing in Miller's Market, among the familiar aisles, looking lost and broken. Her back pain had intensified over the past few days, and Dr. Martinez, the local obstetrician, had warned her about early labor signs. 34 weeks pregnant now. Every twinge set off alarm bells in her mind. The digital clock blinked 3:47 a.m. when a sharp contraction gripped her. This wasn't like the Braxton Hicks she'd been experiencing. This was real, intense, and far too early. No, not yet," she whispered, fumbling for her phone. Inez answered on the second ring, her voice instantly alert despite the hour. "Diane, what's wrong?" "The baby, I think something's not right." Her voice cracked as another contraction hit. Within minutes, Inez was in her room, already dressed and calm. "How far apart are they?" "About 12 minutes, I think." "It's too early, Inez, I can't." "You can and you will." Inez cut her off gently but firmly. "I've already called Dr. Martinez. She's meeting us at the hospital in Riverside. That's why we've been practicing this drive, remember?" In Boston, Richard sat in his darkened office, staring at his computer screen. The private investigator's latest email glowed mockingly. Possible lead in Vermont. Small town named Millbrook. Witness reported seeing a woman matching your wife's description working at a local market. His hands shook as he reached for his keys, then stopped. His therapist's words from their last session echoed in his mind. Before you find her, you need to find yourself. What will you say to her that isn't just another attempt to control the narrative? The 40-minute drive to Riverside Memorial was a blur of pain and fear for Diane. Inez drove steadily through the darkness, one hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze Diane's arm. Tell me about your students, she said, clearly trying to distract her. The ones from your teaching days. Diane gasped through another contraction. They used to leave poems on my desk, every Friday, even the ones who claimed to hate literature. See? You're a natural mother. You've been practicing with teenagers for years. The emergency room lights were harsh after the dark drive. Dr. Martinez was waiting, her familiar face a comfort, as she quickly assessed the situation. Let's see what's going on with this eager little one. Hours passed in a haze of medical terms and monitoring equipment. Magnesium sulfate dripped into Diane's veins, trying to stop the premature labor. Inez never left her side, her presence solid and unwavering. Someone should call Richard, Diane whispered during a moment of clarity. If something happens, he should know his child. Do you want me to? Inez asked carefully. Before Diane could answer, Dr. Martinez returned with news that made everything else fade away. The medications are working, contractions are slowing down, but Diane, you'll need complete bed rest for the next few weeks. This little one needs more time to cook. Tears of relief streamed down Diane's face. Inez squeezed her hand, then stepped out to make some calls. Through the hospital room window, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Later that afternoon, as Diane drifted in and out of sleep in her hospital bed, she overheard Inez talking quietly with Dr. Martinez in the hallway. She's got no family here, Inez was saying. Her room above my garage isn't ideal for bed rest. I know what she needs. Dr. Martinez interrupted gently. The question is, are you ready for what you're about to offer? My daughter's old room has been empty for 3 years. It's on the ground floor, has its own bathroom. It's time someone used it again. Diane's hand found her notebook on the bedside table, and she wrote with trembling fingers. In crisis, we learn who we truly are. And sometimes, more importantly, we learn who others are. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the person who drives through the night without hesitation, who holds your hand through pain, who offers shelter not just for your body, but for your breaking heart. In Boston, Richard finally made a decision. He opened his laptop and typed, Dear Dr. Russell, I need to increase our sessions to twice a week. Before I try to find my wife, I need to understand why I keep losing the people I love, why I became so much like my father despite promising myself I never would. The sun set over both cities, Boston and Riverside, painting the sky in identical shades of purple and orange. 2 lives, once intertwined, now moving in separate but parallel journeys of healing and discovery. One running from the past, one finally facing it. The late November sunlight streamed through the bay window of what was now Diane's new room in Inez's house. The space was larger than the garage apartment, with warm yellow walls and built-in bookshelves that still held some of Inez's daughter's old novels. A handmade quilt in shades of blue and green covered the bed where Diane now spent most of her days on mandatory rest. I found these in the attic, Inez said, entering with a box of old picture frames. Thought you might want to make the space your own. She paused, noticing Diane's laptop open to a birth plan template. Planning ahead, Dr. Martinez says if we can make it through 2 more weeks, the baby's chances improve significantly. Diane rubbed her belly, feeling the now familiar movements beneath. I've been researching everything. Sometimes I think knowledge is the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Inez set the box down and sat on the edge of the bed. Knowledge is good, but so is letting yourself feel whatever you're feeling. In Boston, Richard sat in Dr. Russell's office, his tie loosened, his normally perfect posture slumped. The therapist's question hung in the air between them. Tell me about the moment you first started becoming your father. I was 10. Richard finally spoke, his voice distant. Mom was crying in the kitchen. Dad had forgotten their anniversary. Again, he was working late. Again, I promised myself I'd never be like that. But then he died, and suddenly all I could see were the similarities. The way he'd retreat into silence when things got emotional, the way he'd work instead of face his feelings. I started doing the same things, telling myself it was different because I knew I was doing it. Back in Millbrook, Diane sorted through the picture frames, pausing when she found one that held a photo of a younger Inez with a teenage girl who had her mother's smile. "That's Olivia," Inez said softly. "She's in Seattle now, working as a software engineer. Calls every Sunday like clockwork. You raised her alone. Her father left when she was 2. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility." Inez's voice held no bitterness, only a quiet strength. "Best gift he ever gave us was his absence. Taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is rebuild from scratch." Diane reached for her notebook, but Inez gently took her hand. "Sometimes you need to live the moment before you write about it." In his Boston office, Richard cleaned out his desk drawer, finally facing the stack of unopened sympathy cards from his father's funeral. 2 years of grief, locked away in envelopes. His fingers trembled as he opened the first one. Meanwhile, snow began to fall outside Diane's window, the first of the season. She watched the flakes dance in the wind, creating patterns that reminded her of her students' poetry. One of them had once written about snow as nature's way of starting over, covering everything in blank pages. "I've been thinking," Inez said, returning with 2 mugs of herbal tea, "about what happens after the baby comes. Miller's Market has a back office that never gets used. We could set up a little nursery there, for when you're ready to come back to work." Diane's throat tightened. "You've already done so much." "Stop that right now," Inez cut her off. "Life's not about keeping score. It's about building something worthwhile together." She gestured to the room around them. "Olivia's not coming back to live here. This space needs life in it again. And She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I forgot how much I missed having someone to take care of." In Dr. Russell's office, Richard finished his session with a revelation that left him shaking. "I'm not just grieving my father," he said. "I'm grieving the man I could have been if I hadn't been so afraid of becoming him that I became him anyway." The snow continued to fall as evening settled over Millbrook. Diane sat in her new bed, surrounded by empty picture frames waiting to be filled with new memories. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Today I learned something about family. It's not just blood or marriage or obligation. Sometimes it's a spare room offered without hesitation, a box of empty frames ready for new beginnings, a woman who sees your breaks and fractures and says, 'Here, let me help you rebuild.'" Later that night, as Inez checked on her before bed, Diane finally asked the question that had been lingering. "Why did you really help me that first day?" Inez leaned against the doorframe, her silver-streaked hair catching the soft lamplight. "Because 25 years ago, I was you. Different circumstances. Same lost look in your eyes. Someone helped me then. Taught me that when you help someone rebuild their life, you often find pieces of your own that you didn't know were missing." The baby kicked, strong and sure, as if agreeing. Outside, the snow continued its gentle work of transformation, covering the old and making way for the new. December arrived in Millbrook with a series of snowstorms that transformed the town into a scene from a winter postcard. Diane, now at 37 weeks, watched from her window as Inez shoveled the driveway, refusing all offers of help from neighbors. The older woman's determination was a force of nature itself. Inside, the house was warm with the scent of baking cookies. Inez's stress relief, she'd learned. Today's batch was chocolate chip, the 3rd since they'd received the news. Richard had been spotted in a neighboring town, asking questions about a pregnant woman working at a market. "And we should talk about what you want to do," Inez said, entering with a plate of still warm cookies and settling into the armchair beside Diane's bed. "He's going to find you eventually." Diane's hands instinctively cradled her belly. "I know. Part of me has been waiting for this, I think." She reached for her notebook, flipping to a fresh page. "Dr. Russell, his therapist, sent me a letter." Inez's eyebrows rose. "You didn't mention that." "It came yesterday. She says Richard's been doing intensive therapy, twice a week since I left, working through his father's death, his patterns of emotional withdrawal." Diane's voice trembled. "She didn't tell him she was contacting me. Said she just thought I should know he's trying to change." Meanwhile, in a small motel 20 miles from Millbrook, Richard sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his father's pocket watch. The last therapy session before he'd left Boston played in his mind. "What will you do if you find her?" Dr. Russell had asked. "I don't know anymore," he'd admitted. "At first, I wanted to convince her to come home. Now, I think I just want her to know who I'm trying to become, even if it's too late for us. Back in Dayane's room, Inez watched as her young friend struggled with her thoughts. What are you feeling right now? Not thinking, feeling. Fear, Dayane whispered. Not of him, exactly. Of myself. Of how easily I could slip back into being that person who carried everyone else's emotions but never dealt with her own. A sharp kick from the baby made her wince. The movements had been stronger lately, more insistent. Dr. Martinez said everything looked good at the last checkup, but warned that stress could trigger early labor. Write it down, Inez encouraged, nodding toward the notebook. You always see clearer when you write. Dayane's pen moved across the page. How do you measure change? In therapy sessions? In apologetic letters? In the distance between who someone was and who they're trying to become? And what about my own changes? The strength I've found in this small town, in this borrowed room, in the family I've built from scattered pieces of trust and kindness. The sound of a car door closing outside made them both freeze, but it was just Mrs. Henderson, arriving for her weekly coffee date with Inez, a tradition that had started during Dayane's bed rest. You don't have to decide anything today, Inez said, standing to answer the door. But whatever you choose, remember this. That room downstairs isn't borrowed. It's yours for as long as you want it. Some families we're born into, others we build along the way. In his motel room, Richard made a decision. He pulled out his phone and, for the first time since Dayane left, called Lindsay. I need you to tell her everything, he said when she answered. If I find her, when I find her, she deserves to know the whole truth. About how it started, about my father, about all of it. No more hiding. Lindsay's silence spoke volumes. Finally, she said, I'll write it all down. She should know I was as broken as you were. Different reasons, same poor choices. The afternoon light faded early, as it did in December. Dayane sat with Mrs. Henderson and Inez, listening to their stories of Millbrook winters past, of communities coming together during storms, of endings that became unexpected beginnings. My Harold, Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes distant with memory. He came back from the war a different man. Took him years to find himself again. But he did, with help and time. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is admit they're lost and ask for directions home. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Dayane felt a different kind of movement in her belly. Stronger, more rhythmic. She recognized the sensation from her birthing books. Practice contractions. Her body preparing for what was to come. In her notebook, she wrote one final entry. Tomorrow, Richard will probably find me. Tomorrow, I'll have to decide if knowing someone is trying to change is enough reason to let them back into your life. Not as what they were, but as what they're becoming. Tomorrow, I'll have to be brave in a whole new way. But tonight, in this room that Inez insists is no longer borrowed but mine, I realize something. I'm not the same woman who left Boston. That woman was running away. This woman, the one I've become, is standing her ground. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm facing it as myself, not as someone's wife, not as someone's victim, but as the person I've discovered I can be. The snow continued to fall outside, covering everything in a blanket of possibility. Change, Dayane was learning, came in many forms, sometimes as sudden as a revelation, sometimes as gradual as snow building up against a window pane, transforming the view one flake at a time. The morning dawned clear and brutally cold, the kind of December day where breath froze in the air and car engines protested awakening. Dayane had been up most of the night, the practice contractions growing more frequent, though not yet painful enough to cause alarm. She stood by the kitchen window, watching Inez clear the walkway of fresh snow. When she saw him, Richard's black SUV pulled up slowly, parking across the street. He sat there for a long moment, his figure barely visible through the frosted windows. He's here, Dayane called softly to Inez, who immediately came inside, shrugging off her heavy coat. Want me to send him away? Dayane pressed her hand against her lower back, where a dull ache had been building. No, it's time. Richard emerged from his car looking both familiar and strange. The expensive coat remained, but his usual clean-shaven face now carried several days' stubble. His normally perfect hair was windblown, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He stood at the end of the walkway, not advancing, as if waiting for permission. Inez opened the front door but stayed protectively close to Diane, who had moved to stand in the doorway. The winter air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of snow and pine and memories of another life. "You look—" Richard's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "You look beautiful." A contraction gripped Diane, stronger than the others. She gripped the doorframe, breathing through it. Richard took an instinctive step forward, then stopped himself. "Are you okay?" The concern in his voice was genuine, unmasked by his usual controlled facade. "I just practiced contractions," she managed. "They've been happening all night. Maybe this isn't the best time," Inez started, but Diane shook her head. "Please, come in," she said to Richard. "We should talk." In the warm kitchen, with Inez purposefully busy at the counter making tea, Richard and Diane sat across from each other at the small table. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I've been in therapy," he finally said. "Twice a week. Dr. Russell. She's helping me understand things I should have faced years ago." "I know. She wrote to me." Richard's eyes widened slightly. "She did? I didn't ask her to." "She said you didn't know." Another contraction came, and Diane breathed deeply, waiting for it to pass. When she opened her eyes, she found Richard watching her with naked concern. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he said quietly. "I mean, part of me wants to. God, every part of me wants to. But these past months, I've learned that wanting something doesn't give you the right to demand it." Inez set mugs of tea before them and quietly left the room, though Diane knew she wouldn't go far. "I've changed too," Diane said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I'm not the same woman who left that letter on our kitchen counter. I know. I can see it in the way you hold yourself. You're stronger." He paused, struggling with his next words. "I'm sorry. Not just for Lindsay, though God knows I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for becoming exactly what I promised I'd never be, for making you carry not just your emotions, but mine too. My father's death. It broke something in me, but that's no excuse for breaking us." A stronger contraction seized Diane, lasting longer than the others. She gripped the edge of the table, a small gasp escaping her lips. "And how far apart are they?" Richard asked, his voice sharp with worry. "About 12 minutes, she managed, "but getting stronger." "That's not practice contractions," he said, standing. "That's labor." As if confirming his words, Diane felt a warm gush of fluid. Her water had broken. "Inez," Richard called, already moving to support Diane. Inez appeared instantly, taking in the situation with one glance. "Car's already warming up. Hospital bag is by the door. Been ready for weeks." The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated movement. Inez grabbed the bags while Richard helped Diane into her coat. Years of shared life made their movements automatically synchronized, despite the months apart. In the car, with Inez driving and Richard in the back seat supporting Diane through contractions, the strangeness of the moment struck her. Here they were, her past and present colliding, both helping to usher in her future. "I meant what I said," Richard murmured between contractions. "I'm not asking you to come back, but I am asking, hoping, that maybe we could find a new way forward. Not what we were, but something else. Something honest." Through the pain of another contraction, Diane found his hand and squeezed it. Not in forgiveness, not in reconciliation, but in acknowledgement of what was, what is, and what might be. "First," she gasped as the contraction eased, "we have a baby to meet." The car sped through the snowy landscape, carrying them all toward a future none of them could have imagined just months ago. In the distance, the sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the pristine snow, like nature's own way of marking new beginnings. The delivery room at Riverside Memorial hummed with focused energy as Diane worked through another contraction. 8 hours had passed since her water broke, and the winter storm outside had intensified, turning the world beyond the windows into a blur of white. "You're doing great," Dr. Martinez encouraged, checking the monitors. "Baby's handling everything perfectly. Won't be long now." Inez stood on one side of the bed, wiping Diane's forehead with a cool cloth, while Richard maintained his position on the other, letting her squeeze his hand through each wave of pain. The past hours had stripped away all pretense between them, leaving only raw humanity. "Tell me something true," Diane gasped as another contraction built. "Something you've never told anyone." Richard's face softened with unexpected vulnerability. The day after Dad died, I found his journal. He'd written about how proud he was of me, how much he regretted not saying it enough. I never told anyone because it meant he knew. He knew how much his silence hurt, and he still chose it. The contraction peaked, and Dayane's grip on his hand tightened. Your turn, he said as it eased. Tell me something true. I knew about Lindsay before I saw the tablet, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Not the details, but I felt it. I just couldn't face it. It was easier to pretend everything was fine than admit our marriage was following the same pattern as your parents. Inez watched this exchange silently, her dark eyes taking in the way these two broken people were finally speaking their truths. Even as new life prepared to enter the world, another contraction built, stronger than before. Dr. Martinez checked again and nodded. It's time to push, Dayane. Your baby's ready to meet you. The next 30 minutes were a blur of effort, encouragement, and raw determination. Richard found himself whispering words he'd held back for too long. You're amazing. You're the strongest person I know. I'm so sorry I ever made you doubt that. Inez kept up a steady stream of practical support, her presence grounding Dayane when the pain threatened to overwhelm her. Focus on my voice. You're doing exactly what you need to do. This baby is coming into a world full of love, no matter what shape that love takes. With one final, powerful push, their child entered the world. The room filled with strong, healthy cries. It's a girl, Dr. Martinez announced, placing the squirming infant on Dayane's chest. And she's perfect. Time seemed to stop as Dayane looked down at her daughter's face for the first time. The baby's eyes were wide open, a deep blue-gray that held all the wisdom of new souls. Her tiny fingers flexed against Dayane's skin, and in that moment, everything else fell away. Hello, little one, she whispered. I've been waiting so long to meet you. Richard stood transfixed, tears streaming openly down his face. All his careful composure, all the walls he'd built over years of emotional suppression, crumbled at the sight of his daughter. She looks like you, he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Yeah, she looks like herself, Inez corrected gently, and that's exactly as it should be. As the medical team efficiently handled the post-birth procedures, Dayane found herself struck by the strangeness and rightness of this moment. Here they were, her past, her present, and her future, all wrapped up in this sterile hospital room while a snowstorm raged outside. Later, when things had quieted and the baby was sleeping peacefully in the hospital bassinet, Richard pulled a letter from his coat pocket. Lindsay wrote this, he said, placing it on the bedside table. The whole truth about everything. You deserve to know whenever you're ready to read it. Dayane looked at the envelope, then at their sleeping daughter. I think I already know everything I need to know. The past is just that. Past. What matters is who we choose to be now. For her, Inez, who had been dozing in the corner chair, opened her eyes. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let go of the story we thought we were supposed to live and embrace the one we're actually living. Through the window, the storm had begun to ease, revealing a sky painted in the soft pinks and purples of dawn. The world looked new, washed clean by the snow, just as the small family in room 317 found themselves transformed by the tiny being who now slept peacefully between them. We need to name her, Richard said softly. Dayane reached for her ever-present notebook, opening to a blank page. I've been thinking about that, about names that mean new beginnings, fresh starts. The baby stirred in her sleep, making those tiny sounds that new babies make, as if agreeing that her story, too, was ready to be written. Spring came early to Millbrook that year. The March air carried hints of warmth as Dayane sat in her favorite spot on Inez's front porch, watching her 3-month-old daughter sleep in the morning light. They had named her Aurora Dawn Pierce Hale, a name that spoke of new beginnings and fresh starts. The porch swing creaked gently as Inez joined her, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in hand. Richard called earlier, said he'll be here around noon. Dayane nodded, accepting one of the mugs. The past 3 months had established a rhythm none of them had expected. Richard had rented a small apartment in Millbrook, close enough to be present in Aurora's life but far enough to give Dayane the space she needed. He came for daily visits, sometimes staying for dinner, other times just sitting quietly with their daughter while Dayane worked part-time at Miller's Market. Got a letter from Olivia this morning, Inez said, smiling at Aurora's sleeping form. She's planning to visit next month. Says she can't wait to meet her new little sister. The words brought tears to Dayane's eyes. Family had taken on new meaning since Aurora's birth. It wasn't just about blood or marriage anymore. It was about choice, about the people who showed up every day, who held space for growth and healing. Inside the house, Diane's notebook lay open on the kitchen table, its pages filled with 3 months of new observations. Aurora smiled today, a real smile, not just gas. Richard was here, and for a moment, I saw the man he could have been, the man he's trying to become. He holds her like she's made of glass and steel at the same time, fragile but unbreakable. Inez taught me how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies today, said every mother needs a recipe to pass down, even if motherhood comes in unexpected ways. The sound of Richard's car pulling into the driveway drew Diane back to the present. He emerged carrying a small package and wearing the relaxed clothes that had replaced his formal suits. Another change that spoke of deeper transformation. "There's my girls," he said softly, climbing the porch steps. Aurora stirred at the sound of his voice, her eyes opening to reveal that same deep blue-gray that had captured their hearts 3 months ago. Inez stood, gathering the coffee mugs. "I'll give you 3 some time. Got cookies in the oven anyway." Richard took her vacant seat, maintaining the careful distance he always kept now, close enough to co-parent, far enough to respect boundaries. "I've been thinking," he said, watching Aurora stretch her tiny arms. "Dr. Russell suggested I start a journal, like my dad's, but not just for me, for Aurora, to write down the things I want to make sure she knows, so she never has to wonder." He handed Diane the package he'd brought. Inside was a leather-bound journal, similar to her own notebooks but newer, its pages blank and waiting. "I thought maybe we could both write in it. Different perspectives, different truths, so she knows where she came from, but more importantly, where she can go." Diane ran her fingers over the smooth leather. "I'd like that." Aurora made a small sound, and they both instinctively reached for her. Their hands brushed, and for the first time, neither pulled away immediately. The touch was different now, not charged with past pain or future expectations, but grounded in the present moment. "I've been offered a position at the community college," Diane said, adjusting Aurora's blanket. "Teaching literature part-time. The schedule would work around the market hours." Richard's face lit up with genuine happiness, not the controlled smile of his past self, but something real and unguarded. "That's wonderful. You were always meant to teach." From inside came the smell of fresh cookies and the sound of Inez humming, the soundtrack of this new life that had formed from the ashes of the old. The spring breeze carried promises of growth, of gardens waiting to bloom, of possibilities neither of them had imagined 6 months ago. "We did it backward, didn't we?" Diane mused, watching Aurora track a butterfly with her eyes. "Most people fall in love rather than build a life. We had to break apart to learn how to build something real. Maybe that's how it needed to be," Richard replied. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters." As if on cue, Aurora reached up, catching a shaft of sunlight in her tiny fist. They watched her, these 2 people who had journeyed from betrayal to forgiveness, from brokenness to healing, from loss to unexpected joy. Later that evening, after Richard had gone home and Aurora was asleep in her crib, Diane made the final entry in her old notebook. 6 months ago, I wrote that he lost me before he realized there was something to lose. Today, I understand that sometimes losing yourself is the first step to finding who you're meant to be. Aurora will grow up knowing love in all its forms, not just the pretty parts, but the messy recovery, the hard-won trust, the family you choose, and the strength that comes from starting over. Tomorrow, I'll start writing in the new journal with Richard, not to rewrite our past, but to shape Aurora's future. Because that's what this has all been about. Learning that endings are just beginnings in disguise, that family is something you build daily, and that love in its truest form is not about possession, but about growth. Inez appeared in the doorway, wearing her familiar knowing smile. "Ready for our evening tea?" Diane closed her notebook and stood, ready to join this woman who had become more than a friend, more than a surrogate mother, who had become the bridge between who she was and who she had become. "You know what I learned from all this?" she asked as they headed to the kitchen. "What's that, honey?" "That sometimes the best thing someone can lose is the person they thought they had to be." The spring night wrapped around the house like a gentle embrace, while inside, 3 generations of women, bound not by blood, but by choice, sat together, planning tomorrow's adventures, sharing yesterday's wisdom, and celebrating the beautiful mess of today. 5 years later, the autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees lining Millbrook's Main Street, their leaves a canvas of red and gold. Outside Miller's Market, a banner proclaimed 25 years of service, celebrating Inez Marlowe. Inside, 5-year-old Aurora balanced on a step stool behind the register, her dark curls escaping their braids as she carefully helped Mrs. Henderson bag groceries. "Just like Grandma Inez taught me," she announced proudly. Diane watched from her position in the newly expanded book section of the store, her contribution to the family business. What had started as a few shelves of paperbacks had grown into a cozy reading nook, complete with a weekly story time she led for local children. The bell above the door chimed as Richard entered, carrying a stack of papers. His wedding ring, new, different from the one he'd worn in their first marriage, caught the afternoon light. They had remarried 6 months ago, a small ceremony in Inez's backyard. Not a continuation of their old relationship, but the beginning of something entirely new, built on 5 years of honest growth and conscious choices. The community college approved the full creative writing program, he announced, setting the papers on the counter. After 3 years of teaching literature part-time, Diane had proposed expanding the curriculum. Richard, who now managed his consulting business remotely from Millbrook, had helped develop the financial proposal. "Mama," Aurora called out, "can I read my story at the celebration tonight?" "Of course, sweetie," Diane smiled, remembering the carefully printed pages in her daughter's backpack. A tale about a magical grocery store where love was the most important ingredient. The back door opened as Inez returned from her lunch break, accompanied by her daughter Olivia, who had recently moved back to Millbrook to open a tech startup. The two women carried boxes of old photographs for the evening's celebration. "Found these in the attic," Inez announced. 25 years of memories. As they sorted through the photos, one in particular caught Diane's eye. That first morning she had walked into Miller's Market, scared and pregnant, running from one life and unknowingly walking into another. She pulled out the final volume of her old notebooks. She'd filled 12 over the years, and wrote what would be its last entry. "Life has a way of bringing you full circle, but never quite back to the same place. You return changed, stronger, wiser." Looking at Aurora helping in the store, just as I did that first winter, I see how loss can transform into legacy, how endings become beginnings if you're brave enough to let them. Today, we celebrate not just Inez's 25 years at Miller's Market, but the countless lives she's touched, the family she's built, the love she's taught us all to recognize in its many forms. Richard and I found our way back to each other, but only after finding ourselves first. Aurora grows surrounded by different kinds of strength: Inez's wisdom, Olivia's determination, Richard's vulnerability, and hopefully, my resilience. Tonight, our daughter will read her story about a magical grocery store, not knowing that she's living in one. A place where second chances come with the morning coffee, where family is as much about choice as blood, and where love isn't about what you keep, but what you set free to grow. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what was waiting for you all along. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay lost long enough to be found by the right people. Outside, the maple leaves continued their dance in the autumn wind, nature's own celebration of cycles, changes, and the constant renewal of life. Inside Miller's Market, a family, unconventional, chosen, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection, prepared to celebrate not just 25 years of a business, but the endless possibilities that come with having the courage to begin again. After all, every ending is just another way to say, once upon a time, the end. Based on this moving story of overcoming and starting over, I'd like to ask a profound question for reflection. Just as Diane had to make a difficult decision when she discovered the betrayal, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping up appearances of a perfect life or taking a brave leap into the unknown? What made you stay or go? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.